everybody, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live. It is episode 12 of season 7. How is everyone doing? I hope doing well. We're going to need some questions posted over here on Twitch and or on YouTube so we can start tackling them. Let's see, what is going on over here? Well, I mean, lots of stuff is moving and shaking. We've got, I hope everybody had a good holiday weekend if you're in the United States from last weekend. Weather's pretty miserable here right now. It rained and now it's crazy humid. We are going to be announcing the half res tickets in Chicago very soon, hopefully. And we're going to be having early bird pricing. So if you have the ability to come to Chicago and come to the big motion graphics conference and the MoGraph conference that I help run here in Chicago, then that's coming up soon. Also, I am going to be speaking at a different event in Chicago. Let me see if I've got that up somewhere. Searching for the screen. Actually, I can probably find that on Slack. Click on this and pull this window over and maximize this. I'll put a link here if you're anywhere near Chicago. Hopefully that's not making audio. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Click, many buttons. Boop. Okay. So yeah, here's an upcoming event. This is Safe Space, which is usually based out of LA, but they're going to be doing an event here in Chicago. And Jason Whitmore is going to be speaking from Laundry Studio, and they run the event. And they invited me to come and speak, so I'm going to be talking there as well. This is happening in a week and a day in Chicago. There's going to be food and drink and all sorts of networking, so everybody should come on down to that if you are around. That should be fun. But anyway, I think that is most everything. Yeah, the Half Res website will be launched soon. So excited for that. Let's see. Demi is saying, how do I make particles stop moving when in proximity to other particles or splines? In proximity to other particles or splines, I want to make some branching effect by avoiding particles intersecting with the trails of others. Yeah, branching effect by avoiding particles. Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about. At least I think I do. So let's head on over to my laptop here, where the particles run much better. Now, you're actually, the way your question is stated is making me think of, actually, let me pop up here and then click on the window. That is my email, which is why I did that. And I can do this one. And I'm going to Google C4D tree Chris Schmidt Cineversity. This will be a funny thing to show. Super duper old. I'll pop it back on screen as soon as I can tell if it's going to load or not. It is, Cineversity is not loading quickly. Oh, it's popped in. Yeah, oh wow. Okay, so look at this. So this is the first thing I ever did for Maxon. Oh my goodness, the audio terrible. But like, look at this is the first video I ever recorded. Maybe it might be the first video tutorial I ever recorded because this predates anything with Grayscale Gorilla. So this is on Cineversity, and you can see, look at the size of the screen. Look at the old interface of Cinema. So that's pretty crazy. But anyway, this was how I kind of got tied in with Maxon in the beginning, was because I spent a whole bunch of time with thinking particles, and I built out this crazy tree growing rig. Keep in mind how old this would be. This is going way back. And let's see how quickly. Yeah, it looks like I'm about to show it. So if I apply this all particle based, and this was using thinking particles, and I was doing a very similar concept. So you can see I've been kind of fascinated with like growing trees and plants and stuff. So us making that branch spline modifier wasn't the surprise, because now you can do this entire thing parametrically, except for the avoiding. But a whole bunch of the properties here were all about like branch avoidance. Now this is like going way back in the day before I knew much about like interface design or anything. But yeah, a bunch of different cool settings and things you build out of it. But when you actually get into it and you start looking at like the hierarchies and the crazy amount of stuff that's layered up there, like things get pretty crazy. And this entire thing's like a tutorial series talking about, like, look at all these different controls that are involved, like seed controls, global controls, branch controls, leaf controls, velocity, inherent, tree shaper, wind, geometry. So like all this stuff, and there's tons of different controls on everything. Anyway, I just thought I would show that off. It's kind of a crazy old thing. I guess I probably should get that window open to link it. But anyway, so Demi is asking about that in the context of um, is asking about that in the context of the particles. So if we open up our particles here, we are going to see that, yeah, we want to set up a basic emitter. And now I think the basic idea is the same thing, which is we want kind of a trail of particles flying around. They're going to leave a trail of particles behind them. And then those become something that we then avoid. Let me reread the question to make sure I'm correct in that assumption. How can we make particles stop moving when in proximity to other particles response? I want to make some branching effect by avoiding particles intersecting. So I guess that's sort of two different things. Let me think about this. Like leaving that trail behind is sort of different than what you seem to be describing, which would be, I know there's like two different aspects to this. And if you want to add some clarity to it as I sort of tinker around with it, we'll find out. But I'm going to do a couple things to make this visible. We're going to emit from a point, and then we are emitting a, actually, yeah, we'll do a rate. So we're constantly emitting some particles. In our properties, under direction, I'll say random. Yeah, so it's going to fly out in all random directions. We have a set speed, and they'll live forever right now. And under color, let's make a random gradient, load in something with like, let's just grab all the colors. I'll even double the knots just to make sure that everything is getting struck. And I'll grab my particle group, and we'll say the size is size 3, just so you can see it. And if I hit play, we should start emitting some particles from the center, and they should start flying off in all directions. GPU is spinning up. I don't know if GPUs spin up. Actually, I know they don't. But now we have a whole cluster of particles flying out. So now we need some extra frames flying out. And I think that we'll probably put a tracer on here just so we can see those trails and what direction things are traveling. This will give us a pretty good vibe. And I'll say limit from ends, make it like a tail of 25. Now I think we're probably making way too many particles. So under emission, let's drop this down to 10. So now we're making fewer. And then we're going to do some things to keep this controllable. So let's make a turbulence, give it some relatively large scale and some relatively large strength. So now we get all these kind of drifting around doing their thing. It's quite fast right now, but before I worry about slowing it down, let's just make a friction, like an overall friction, saying let's slow everything down in the scene. So yeah, everything slows down. So their initial velocity quickly goes away, but now the turbulence is letting them drift around, do their own thing. Now it is still moving a little quickly for me. So let's grab the turbulence and say that you are significantly weaker, like 15%. Yeah, now we got them drifting around a little bit more slowly. And then I want to have everything get attracted back to the center at a certain point. So do we just do some sort of fall off on that? We could use just the generic attractor and say that I want it to be a constant number getting applied. And the speed limit doesn't matter. The minimum distance doesn't matter. And now it's all about like, what level of strength do we put in here so that the stuff, generally speaking, doesn't want to get too far away. But we don't want it so strong that everything's just like clustered in the middle. So let's do a strength of like 5. So now you see we got all this randomness drifting around. Everybody's doing their own thing. And generally speaking, they don't want to drift too far away. Some of them might, but I'm not super worried about like those ones that do escape. Let's give this a quick save. And let's go into episode. Actually, I didn't copy the folder over now that I think about it. This is in here. I usually call the folder. Wait, that's on. Do I just call it the episode number? Yeah, I guess I do. That's unexpected. Boop and boop and boop. New folder, boop, and 12. Okay, inside this folder, we're going to make a 1A, and it's going to be particle void. Okay, cool. Benjamin, if you are trying to put a link on YouTube, it's not going to work. You cannot put links on YouTube. You have to go over to Twitch to post a link, because right now it just says, how do I make this in Cinema? But there's nothing else. let's see. Okay, Demi's adding on a little bit of extra info, saying, uh, I thought using the tracer with particle. I thought using the tracer with particle. So if any particle was a certain distance from the traced particle, it would stop. Yeah, application is about coral structure. Okay, that's sort of what I thought we were going for here. But we got, there's a couple different avenues here that just exploring the different avenues by itself will be valuable. So I don't mind us doing a couple of different paths here. Um, Trey, I will try and tackle that question when this is wrapped up so we're not drifting topics too much. Okay, so these are drifting around now. We got these tails. In theory, we could just freeze them the moment they get too close to the trail of another one. Let's experiment with that. That would be relatively straightforward. Actually, is that true? There is actually, I just remembered one of the things that makes this process tricky, and that is any given particle. How do I explain this? If we were to make a field condition, and that field condition is going to say, hey, this spline has a radius around it. And if a particle gets too close to that spline, it's going to freeze. The problem with that is the particle that's creating the trail will also freeze. So you end up stuck in this kind of feedback loop where everything would instantly freeze. So we can't do it as simple as that. Um, so, um, along those lines, I wonder if we don't do this with a tracer. Yeah, we will get rid of that tracer. And now here's the thought. We've got all these particles drifting around, and I will, because now there's a reason to, let's load in a more limited color palette. We'll load in a bunch of these pink ones. And now we've got all these pink particles flying around. Now, what I'd like to do is emit, like reproduce these particles like a whole bunch. So we're going to say reproduce. So this group of particles will reproduce, and we're going to be constantly emitting from it. So under reproduce, let's say trail 1 is going to be this reproduce. So we will say per particle from the group it's coming from. Very important to have this limited to that group. Otherwise, you create a feedback loop and it'll freeze up super quick. Per particle, create a count of 1, mode constant, offset continuous. I think this is all correct. I think based on what I just did, every one of these should be creating a single particle constantly trailing behind it. And from this trail, maybe we'll even colorize the trail. But for right now, if I hit play, I'm prepared to hit pause very quickly. Yeah, now it's selected. So I'll deselect that. And now you can see we've got this constant cluster of particles getting generated. Now, every time you create a new emitter, I think it randomly creates a new color for it. The first one's always green, but after that, it's probably random. So let's just go and put this into a green range, and we'll have the particle trail have a size of 2. So anyway, now you see these are constantly spitting out a particle, but it's not getting exponential. It's just every particle spitting out a certain number of them. Now, I think let's grab our reproduce, and we're going to say, and let's actually grab all of these and drop them inside of the particle group. So the attractor, turbulence, and friction is only applying to our pink particles. So now under the reproduce, we've got these colors. I will say that the speed is set to 0, so they don't move. So now the hope is essentially we're making like a tracer line behind it. You see these are all getting traced because there's no speed, and they're each getting traced much like the tracer would trace them. So now here's where the trick comes in, is after a certain length of time. So let's make a condition, and that says age, which I think we want. And it's currently it's not age percentage, but straight up age. So now I could say after 10 frames, essentially for each particle, when it's older than 10 frames, do something. So I think I will probably just switch the group. So let's make a switch group. So the condition is when it's older than 10, switch the group to, let's create a new group. And now that'll pull out, and we'll call this one trail or freeze. I made a bad metaphor, but I'm going to call this cold. So cold means if something else touches it, it will freeze. So that's a new group. And when it's going to switch the group, let's also do something like switch the color. So I think the easiest way to do that is just make a color mapper. I keep trying to drag these out, but you got to just click them. So the first thing that'll happen is when the condition's met, it will change the color. And this is currently mapping. Is this the best way to do a static color? It only gets applied once. I know we could probably do a math, but then you have to type in the number. So I'm just going to say there is no mapping here, or it doesn't even matter what values we put in here if we just, drag those colors out, so it's always blue. So I'm going to make it kind of a blue color. So it's going to change the color, and then it's going to switch the group, but it'll keep that switched group. And I'll just grab this and also tell it to be a size of 2. So now the hope is that we emit these green particles, and then after each of those particles turns older than 10, it switches to this blue group. Now, the reason for doing it this way is it's kind of like we just did what we were doing with the tracer, but now we've got this buffer range. We got this range of green particles that we can ignore and essentially say that we want to freeze or do something else on the initial ones, or on the blue ones rather. So now if we make a new condition, we can kind of loop around and say, how do we get that proximity? Sort of a collide, which we can probably extract from flocking or predator prey. Possibly we can do it from a field. Let's try field, because that feels the most straightforward. So I'm going to drop this after the reproduce. We'll have a field condition. And the field, I will drag in the cold particles. And now there is a fall off of 20, a radius of 20 from each of those. And now given this field condition, what should happen? And I will say that the original pink particles should essentially freeze at this point. So I guess the best thing to do there would be to switch its group, because that's a very absolute thing we can do. We can switch the group, and we'll probably even do the color thing as well. So inside the field condition, we will switch the color, and this is getting frozen. So I'll make it like this super bright blue, and it's going to switch the group, and the group is going to be, let's clear that one out, and we'll call this group dot frozen. So now if it gets close to the trail of an old one, it's entering into this new group, and it gets frozen. That's the idea. Now I'm going to grab our little freezing trail, and I'm going to make them smaller just so they're not eating up so much screen space. And let's run it. So now we get the green ones, and they're going to shrink and turn dark blue. And then, and then these are switching group and freezing. Although the field condition is striking a cold particle. This radius just maybe it's just really big. So I might shrink that radius to test it, because all of those suddenly disappeared, and that didn't seem right. Actually, no, they're all coming out blue, which means it can. Oh, all the new ones that are born are immediately in this range of the blue one. Yeah, okay, that's potentially fine. Let's see. Yeah, so the first ones kind of fly out, and then. Why did they disappear? No, now they're still flying. Before they disappeared, and I feel like they shouldn't have. So at least the first couple, you can see that the principle is working. They're continuing to move. These other ones are getting born, and they're getting born too close, so they're immediately freezing. So in order to avoid that, maybe we'll take these cold ones and kill a bunch of them off. So we'll make another condition. I guess I'll make a field condition. So we'll say in the cold ones, the condition will be if they are inside of a spherical field. So T for scale. And I'll just say if you're within like this radius, we'll just kill them off. Keep it simple. There's other methods we might be able to do, but we'll say that. So that is the condition. Now, given the condition, I will kill them. So after that field condition, kill the particles inside of the cold group. So all these blue ones should immediately disappear, and they do. And now you see new ones can successfully be born. Now, once this gets thick enough and there's enough blue lines, that will no longer be the case. But as these now, let's start it over again. As these kind of drift around, do their thing, we should expect to start seeing some of these pink ones. Yeah, you see that one suddenly turned blue because it got near a line and it froze, but a lot of these other ones are still successfully flying around. So some additional things we need to do. They are switching to this frozen group. So I'd like the frozen ones to be, let's even increase the size even more. And that's this group. So we're changing the color to look frozen. That's fine. And then I want to actually stop them from moving. So I will also say, I think inside, let's make a math, and we'll say before they switch groups, their velocity speed will be assigned the value of 0. And as soon as that happens, it immediately switches the group. So now they're in a new group with a new color, a new speed of 0, and they should just freeze right where they are. So let's save that, run it. Let's hide the spherical field. And as we find there, you see one of them froze right there. And now you see all of these are starting to freeze as they strike any one of these. And in theory, we could be taking like these cold particles and we could just hide them so we don't need to see them. And we'll just slowly see these freeze around the areas. And this is entirely based on the field condition and the radius of this cold one. The threshold is probably soft, so it's probably like half that radius because of the remapping that would be happening. So yeah, all these fly around, they're all fine, and then as they strike any line, they will disappear. If we unhide it, you'll see we'll be getting more and more and more of these blue lines, kind of eating up all of the visual space. But we don't need to we don't need to see them. We can always visually hide them. Now, this is indeed freezing the particles, and it's sort of my understanding of what you're trying to do in the beginning. But anyway, you see why the tracer didn't work, but now by putting this this edge behind it, we're able to give it enough buffer zone to escape. Anyway, that's the way I've primarily known to do this type of thing, and honestly, it is the way that I did it inside of the old C4D tree rig that I made. Having said that, let's see, what you sort of tracer. If any other particle was in a certain radius, the trace particle would stop. And yeah, it goes to, I'm trying to think of, you're saying it would be in a coral structure, but like everything as described right now, this is not super applicable to coral, at least not the way we just did it. I want to make a branching effect to avoid particles intersecting with the trails of others. Yeah, I guess I'm just not putting those two parts of your question together. There's more things we could do. Fluff, thank you for subscribing for 3 months. Excellent. Thank you very much. That is appreciated over there on Twitch. Yeah. So yeah, Demi, if you're still here, if you could describe what you're going for a little bit more, because this, this is an interesting rig, and we're making it do a very specific behavior. And I mean, we've got a decent number of objects, but I feel like it's a relatively elegant setup. But what I feel like there's more that you're trying to do. Because if I was just trying to approach the idea of growing coral, I think I would do that differently, like almost completely differently to what we're doing here. Now, in theory, this could also be a rig for avoiding intersection from where paths have already gone, which could be, essentially we have all the structure to do that. I would just modify a few different things here. So maybe we'll continue there until I hear a word from you. So now the thought is we've got all of these particles going, and potentially we could even interconnect them with a tracer, maybe. I don't think that's strictly necessary, but what I'm thinking is we don't actually like do this kill them off or anything. In fact, I don't think we even have the concept of a frozen particle. I'll delete that out. And now when they get within the radius, actually, I don't even think we need to do that. I'm going to get rid of the field condition, all that different stuff. So now we have the particles flying around, and essentially what we want to do is have our pink particles, if they get near one of these blue ones, it's going to kind of drift away and try to avoid it. So that we're going to get all these interwoven lines drifting around, but they never touch each other. They're going to avoid each other. Now, this is not going to be this absolute thing that's like 100% guaranteed, but generally speaking, they will avoid each other. I want to make a tutorial on how to do this with X particles. So let's see if we can get this put together pretty easily here. And honestly, it should be relatively easy because I think all we're going to need maybe is some predator prey. Maybe flocking would also work because we have our separation strength. So yeah, let's try flocking. So this is going to go back to the original particle group. So I'll drop that inside. And what's kind of cool, if this does work, this is it's only affecting this particle group, but it actually, maybe we do need to see them. It might only see the ones that are inside of it. So let's experiment here. Okay, so these are all flocking, but essentially I haven't used flocking in a little bit. Let me try and remember, because right now there's all these behaviors where they're trying to cohere, and we can exclude a group. Cohesion, we don't want cohesion, we want separation. And right now, everything's kind of avoiding everything. It's only applying to the pink particles right now. So they're trying, right now, the pink particles are trying to stay away from each other, but that doesn't mean they won't backtrack and go to where they used to be. So this type of avoiding would also be good in the context of like a tree branch. And let's say that the way of showing this off would be grabbing this, the original particles, and I could put a tracer on there and just trace them forever. And, you know, these trace lines are getting their behavior from you know, all these other particles that we're drawing trails on. So in theory, well, actually, no, right now these lines could intersect, but right now all of these at any given moment are avoiding each other. But what we'd like to do is get them to be avoiding the blue ones. And in order to do that, we might need to make a multi-group. So if we make a multi-group down here, and I'm going to say that's going to link the original group and the cold trail, which in this case, this is like the avoid trail, not the cold trail. So those two groups are there. So if we make another flock there, those two systems should be seeing each other. And right now, I don't know for sure, but I think if I were to hit play, all these blue particles will suddenly fling apart from each other because it's seeing them. So the pink ones are avoiding pink. The blue ones are avoiding blue, but pink and blue are also avoiding each other. That's my thought. So if I hit play, yeah, suddenly you see all the blue ones fly apart from each other. But that's fine because now we can go to excluded groups. Well, here's what we're doing. With this multi-group, we're saying the flock is acting upon all of these, but then it's going to apply the effect. And now we can say, well, apply the effect not to everything. So we'll exclude out a group, and the group we're going to say is the avoid. So that one's part of the calculations now, but it's not going to actually be trying to avoid anything. So now if I hit play, the hope is those blue ones are staying static, which as far as I can tell, yeah, the blue ones are staying exactly where they are. But now these pink ones are going to try and avoid those blue lines. So that was actually a relatively simple thing to put there, you know, to set up. So now the hope would be that within this particular range, and actually nothing's freezing. So yeah, I'm going to shorten this timeline down. So this condition of age, I'm going to say it's only like 3 now. So the green trail will be a lot less. Because you can still end up right here. You see these two lines got very close to each other, but that might be because they're just hanging out near each other. And we've got this new avoid, this flock, so there's no cohesion, but we do have the separation strength. I'm going to make it pretty strong, and I'm going to make the radius pretty large. And let's grab our tracer and put that into a sweep. And in the sweep, we'll feed a end side and drop the radius down to 10, I think. And we'll increase that to 7 to get a little bit more rounded. And the sweep does not need any caps for speed. So I don't know if we cut this in half or not, but the idea, I think, actually might need to be a radius of 5. So the goal is that these tubes are going to try very hard to avoid each other. In the very beginning, that's probably not overly applicable, but let's see. After, yeah, in the beginning, obviously they're, you know, directly intersecting. Now we got this smaller trail, each going. And now let's see if everything seems to work. Now that is not a good sign. That has now gotten pretty close to this one. So the multi-group, we are excluding the avoid. And the velocity alignment, this typically should be the same as that, but actually the velocity alignment, actually we don't need that. Separation strength. Honestly, you don't want to go too high on these numbers, and I'm going to increase the separation radius just to see if it's actually doing something. So I won't be surprised if those get flung out extra hard. Okay, well, it's definitely doing something because that is different than what we had before. So I think we've got this larger radius of avoiding. Let's see. Now I said that, but those two are getting pretty dang close to each other. Particle group, the very first particle group, which we are acting upon, is the initial one, which is the pink ones. And I'm pretty sure the excluded group, yeah, I think that works. Let's see. I'm going to grab the attractor. We're going to make the attractor significantly stronger. So all of these are very much going to want to get pulled back near the middle again. And I want to see if they start kind of intertwisting at all. Because I don't know, in my head, this is kind of correct. I think I'm not actually sure what our radii is right now. So I did say right now it's like a radius of 20. So in theory, yeah, actually it's not as big as I was thinking. It's kind of saying That's the radius. So once it's getting that close to one of the other lines, it would be like trying to avoid it. That's the thought. Is it true? Nobody knows. They are taking a while to twist back around, but they are eventually. Maximum speed, strength, separation radius. I'm just trying to see if some of these will drift inside and how much they're avoiding. Okay, actually, right there. See this? This is a very good example. See how that was traveling right towards it, and then suddenly it got within a certain range about what that sphere looked like, and it went and it turned away. It has now avoided that one. Now I'm not sure. They all seem to have this big forward momentum, so that's making me think that the radius is a little, or this green trail might not be long enough, because maybe these blue particles are being spawned, and then this is seeing those blue particles and is running away from them extra fast, which is making these lines travel in a straight line a lot more than they should be. So even without restarting, I should be able to grab our condition age, and I'm going to tick it up a couple, not much. And I want to see if these are suddenly making sharper turns than they were. It's like going to be something we just have to visually, stylistically observe. Yeah, hard to specifically tell right away, but now there are some things, like right now we are in theory we are generating a lot of these blue particles, which are not the which, you know, it's a lot of particles doing a lot of calculations, trying to see if there's any neighbors, and everything's trying to avoid each other. So there is a lot of potential calculation going on there. So us reducing that amount could go a long way. I'm just taking a look. Yeah, okay. We've got some pretty good examples here of the lines avoiding each other. You see that one turning, that one turning. Of course, you get lots of random movement here, so we got to try and observe specifics. But yeah, look here. Look at that one. Like sharp turn there. So these can be some pretty cool rigs to tinker around with. So I don't know how well we can do this, but I'm thinking that let's actually turn off the tracer entirely. If we let this run, right now we're getting, you know, we're creating, there's very few particles here. So my machine is just saying, hey, we're going to run slow right now. But as a in theory type of thing, we're emitting all these particles from there. If we go to the reproduce, I don't even know if we can do this, but if we go to the reproduce, can we, right now we're saying per particle, make a count of 1. Can we put a fraction in there? No, we can't. It's a whole number, which I thought it would be. Offset, I think, is distance based. So, but okay, my goal here would be, what if we delete like every other particle? You know how like you take the tracer object and you say only trace every other frame. I don't think we need quite so many particles being emitted here. Yeah, so yeah, we could reduce that. Now, in theory, there would be, we could potentially use another flock to calculate that, and if anything's within a certain distance of another, it would delete it. I'm trying to think of a way I could delete every other one. I can think of other hacky ways where you could essentially have these pink ones be like oscillating from one group to another, and they only get a child emitted when it's in one group or another, like just constantly flipping between the groups. That would work. Maybe we could even output like a data where there's a particle ID, and we could delete every even one. That might be interesting. That seems like a thing we could do. Real. Actually, no, real. That. Okay, no, you're right. That's a good way to do it. Real Ruck Lee just mentioned that we could just put this into a condition, which is really smart. We can just make a time condition. Put that here. Drop this in the time condition, and now we just say pulse, and we'll say start frame duration 1 gap. Yeah, so 1. It's a duration of 1 gap of 1. So now we're just alternating. So now we say every other frame reproduce a particle. That's really straightforward. And yeah, indeed, that does seem to have made every other particle. If I deselect that, it'll stop blinking, and then you can see that there are a lot fewer particles being generated. Okay, that was a smarter way to do that. So thank you for that. Tracer needs to be on from the beginning. Okay, so now with any luck, there's fewer particles being done which means there's less calculation needed. With any luck, we put enough of a green tail there that they are not forcing each other apart as much. I might actually increase our turbulence frequency so they're changing directions more often. Um, and then maybe even like shrink our scale so we get like lots of turbulence making those move around. And then the attractor, even that, it's like the tighter all these want to hang out near the middle, the more likely we are to have like potential intersections. What I'd love to do is just kind of get this big knotted ball. And then we can talk about a couple other behaviors we can go in. Actually, look at that. That just did some really great avoiding. You see these two? Um, like in the beginning, they're forced to be there, but this one suddenly was like, wait, I want to get away from you. And it suddenly turned harshly. And then it's like, wait, I'm near you. And it turned harshly again. So it's doing this very strong, like hard edged avoidance. So that's a really good sign here. And all these are just doing mostly what they would be doing anyway, in theory, until you see some of those sharper turns, like right there. I bet that was one avoidance. And it almost looks like it might have done it again. Hard to tell from any one. Yeah, you see the kind of double movement there that I think was some avoidance. And it gets essentially a little bit more and more impressive as we let it play out, because as these kind of tangle up more and more, we're going to see like more knots. And in general, the ball will get bigger and bigger because there's a lot of blue that's avoiding. Now, I would definitely call this technique just avoiding and not any kind of collision detection, because it's entirely possible that one of these will get trapped into a corner and there's nowhere for it to go. It's kind of trapped, and it will just get near something because it kind of has to. So this isn't like proper full on collision. But right now, and yeah, I think it's actually looking pretty good, where you can see we've got this entire giant cluster, all these noodles, and I don't see any direct intersections anywhere. So it's a pretty cool shape that you can make. Yeah, those look really nice. Now these are getting generated, and there are, some of these corners can get relatively sharp. Let me find like a jankier one. Like right here, you kind of get these pinches going because you get these sharp corners. This is actually a really good candidate for throwing in the Rocket Lasso utility spline. So I could feed this tracer into a smooth, and now you can see suddenly it smoothed that out a whole bunch. And a technique that I use sometimes is say, well, let's subdivide the line once. So I'll say one. So I've doubled the number of points. But now, because there's extra points, I can add in a couple of iterations of smoothing, and you'll see that it didn't really change the direction, far as you want to, and create all this. And I guess while we're talking about it, we now have all these nice noodles going all over the place. But we have a lot of geometry being generated. So if you were so inclined, using Rocket Lasso's another one of the utility splines, if I throw this into a rocket reduction, there's a really great algorithm in this one that we developed called deviation. And you'll see suddenly we've dramatically dropped down the number of points that are being swept. So the sweep in theory would be running way faster. But what's great about, we got all these different modes about like angle and optimizing and the percentage along, like reducing it. But our deviation mode is saying that essentially remove a segment until the line has gotten more than 1 centimeter away from where it was originally supposed to be. But that means you can put incredibly small numbers here, like 0.1 centimeters. And now you'll see that when we got a sharper curve, like these areas that are turning, you see that we end up with a whole bunch of subdivisions still there. But any place that's very straight, like any areas that are not curving very much, you can see like, especially like over here, there's some very straight areas, and you just don't need that many subdivisions in order for that to look smooth. So I've now only removed the points from the spline that would be really important to remove. And if you look here, I've actually removed almost 40, I've removed about 30% of the points that would make this up. And as we change this number to other things, if I said like 0.2, it's like how much different does it look here? If I'm in this point of view, if I say 0.1 is really detailed. If I say 0.2, you can see I barely see a difference. I think something in here moved a little bit, but these other ones, I didn't see a difference. But now if we go to advanced, I've now gotten rid of more than 50% of the points, and it didn't look visually different at all. So, that's another like great tool to be able to layer in on these as well. Letting those continue. They should just continue avoiding and getting more and more knotted. We could do a lot more things. We could make the attractor get stronger as we get further away. So like in the middle, they're kind of free to drift, but if they get too far away, there's a lot of strength that really yanks them back. We could layer and layer on top of this rig, but you could imagine applying this to many different things, like plant growth and whatnot. But look, we've got this amazing flying spaghetti monster going. And all of these lines are doing a really great job of not intersecting with each other. Now, the other detail I wanted to, I see there's another follow up on that. I'll go and talk about that. But just something I want to mention is right now we have a flock that is saying if you get within this radius, we've got this really strong separation strength that's going to kind of force them apart. And that's why we're getting those relatively sharp turns. Temporarily, I'll yank this out from my smooth because that's kind of hiding them. Um, Actually, that's an interesting. Oh wait, okay. Here's a real. I thought that maybe two were intersecting, but here you can see that that one was trying to travel and it got really near that one. So we get this really harsh turn because it's like, oh dang, I got really close to another one. I have to change direction because I'm really trying to avoid it with a strength of 5. Now that is actually a good thing to have, where we could even right now maybe shrink that. You can see that that's about the distance that they're going. So we could go to this flock and say, actually, we'll shrink that radius down a little bit, drop this down to maybe like 18. I'm not sure exactly what amount, but just eyeballing it, dropping it down, that percentage feels about right. So that those could have, in theory, gotten closer to each other before they're like, nope, I got to do a sharp turn to get away. But what you can also do is make a second flock. So this will be flock close, and this one will be flock far. So what we do with this one is we make the strength a lot weaker. So I could say like even 1/5 the strength, and we start making the radius significantly larger. Now this might slow us down a little bit, but I don't think that's what's actually visually slowing us down. So now what I've said is these are starting to, this flock is going to make the stuff start drifting away from each other a lot earlier, but a lot weaker. So we get this, in theory, we'll get this very soft drift. Something's like, I'm getting a little bit close to something, so I'm going to slowly turn into a new direction. Like, think of it like a very weak magnet from a little bit of a larger distance away. And then if it gets trapped or it's getting very near one of these, suddenly it gets to this close one and it's 5 times stronger. So, suddenly it's like, I got to make a sharp turn. Now, maybe we could increase this radius more. Maybe we should lower the separation strength down more. But for now, here's what I'm thinking, actually. Why don't we grab the original emitter and let's make a shot of 100. So there's a lot of them right in the beginning, and it won't keep making more and more. Boom. Okay, an initial burst. They're all drifting around. As soon as they've gotten away from this initial cluster, then now we should start getting the avoidance going. And let's just see how this feels. Like, you see this one? That one still made kind of a sharp-ish turn, but maybe it was kind of curving away. I'm not sure. But that is why we're building those two. Actually, what we should do, let's turn off close, and now let's just see what this bigger one does by itself. So this lovely noodle exploding. And now you can see that, yeah, this one is not very strong. So here, maybe this is a good example. You can see that this one's kind of like, oh, it kind of was getting near something, so it turned a little bit, and this one's getting a little near something, but it wasn't strong enough to make it completely dodge it. So that is making me think that potentially it would be a good idea to make this radius larger. Just keep in mind that increasing this radius is dramatically going to increase the calculation time. Now, I'm not sure we're in the thresholds that really matters, but that now means every particle is calculating a lot. Every pink particle is looking at a lot more blue particles for what they should be doing. Now, again, this is now a very soft effect that they're going to start trying to avoid from each other. In the very beginning, I'm not surprised to see some intersections, but generally speaking, this is introducing a soft collision avoidance. So generally speaking, it's avoiding the area where other ones are. But even here, you can see 2 of them near each other. Keep in mind that the bleeding edge, the bleeding edge hasn't turned blue yet, so that got very close and then collided that. So that type of thing could happen anyway. But generally speaking, are they avoiding each other? Like, it's hard to tell visually that they are, but yeah, maybe something like this. It's hard to tell what's the natural turbulence or what's this one kind of getting. It's like, oh, that's getting a little bit near that line. So it's like, I'll curve down more. I'll curve down more. Oh, I'm getting too close. Okay, I curved a little bit more sharply. I wonder, I don't know if this is a good idea, but what if we just turn off our turbulence and now this is pure avoidance. So now all of these want to pull back in again. Yeah, so they all want to pull back in again, and they immediately get tangled up. But if we say get rid of this close thing, now they should be avoiding each other a lot more. So now the curve, yeah, yeah, I wonder if we're still making them too long, because you see these still flew out a lot more. So do we need, I guess the close one's a strong one. So does that mean we need a couple extra frames on this condition? I don't like making that too much because Yeah, that's yeah. See, that did feel like the curve didn't quicker. But now, keep in mind, there's no turbulence anymore. Now they just want to constantly get pulled back towards the middle. So now anything that's making them not go towards the middle is them avoiding each other. We've got the large soft avoid, and I think we're actually seeing good representation here of that soft avoidance here, where they don't seem like they're I don't see that many sharp turns. So I think this, without the turbulence kind of overriding and trying to force in additional directions, this is just pure avoidance because all of them just want to go right back to the dead center. So all of them still traveling around, sneaking through like these open areas is purely them being like, oh, I'm getting too near that particle. Oops, I'm getting too near that particle. And them softly drifting around. So like given enough time, you see this one, this one's gotten quite trapped in the middle. So I kind of want to observe that one. So if we watch this, it's like where can I go? Where can I go? Where can I go? Because it's trying to avoid. Let's see, it goes up. And then that got near this one, so I had to turn, but it did escape from the center. So now you can see we got this wonderful interwoven ball kind of going super crazy. And it's doing a pretty good job of avoiding the intersection. So anyway, that's a lot of the concept that helped make my original tree generator. I dig it. I'm going to give this one a save. This one's still B. So, that's this new concept, this alternate concept. But then there was a question I saw pop in from L. Dang. Oh, not Dang. L. Dage. L. Dage. Could those noodles have any movement and still avoid each other like tentacles? That is a bit challenging. I don't think you could have them grow. We could not have them growing outward from the center and have them they can't be growing and be alive and noodling around like that. There's essentially no system that would do that explicitly by itself. And I just want to show you, if I drop in the smoothing even from here, so we're smoothing and reducing. If I pull it out, you see we get kind of these sharp angles, some like that little chunky one right there. Just drop it inside the smooth, boom, like barely changes, but it got rid of those sharp corners. So yeah, I love the smooth plus reduction combination. Okay, so in order to answer that other question, let me show you a technique I have done. Let's open up a new file, and I'm not sure we need any of that stuff, so let's go to a standard layout. And how do I want to build this one? I will make a sphere. We'll change this to be all triangles. I will add hair as a way of making splines, because why not? So let's go to simulate, and we'll go to hair, add hair. And currently it's from the polygon vertex. I could also say from polygon center. And now there's one hair per center of each triangle. Actually, it would be if I increase the count enough. So yeah, once we go up to the biggest number, now you can see that that's actually one per polygon. Now we can make the length, which I think we probably want quite. Actually, I might reduce our count here just for sanity. And then we will increase the length by quite a bit. Let's do 500. Yeah, that should work. And actually, no, let's do more. Let's do 1,000. How many segments are going to make it up? I'm going to say quite a bit. Let's say 40. So there's now 40 points that make each of these up. And then under the hairs, actually, I don't think we're going to generate hairs, although we might need to. Yeah. So I'm going to say hair. How many hairs are being generated? I'm going to say as guides. So now essentially every guide is going to become one hair. Then we go into our generate. I'll say don't make hairs, instead make splines. So now these should actually be splines in the scene. And I'm going to turn off any simulation or anything that's trying to come from the hair itself. So now this is just like a hair generator. Essentially, I could have also cloned a spline onto every single thing. So this is just kind of a workflow there. If I play, you see they're just kind of there, hanging out, being static. Oh, I think Cinema just froze. Nope, it woke up again. That's weird. Why did it do that? Okay, never mind, it's fine. I suppose that means we should save. Grow noodles. Okay, now, do the hairs get subdivided the same amount? Yeah, it says as guides. I imagine they have the same number of segments now. So I want to add in, actually, yeah, I think we should be able to add in some rope simulation here. So let's go simulation rope. We will make the sphere a collider, simulation collider. And then on the hair, which is just a spline object right now, we will say connect to other objects, live update. Are they creating connections? Maybe, oh, is that a thing? We can't connect to a collider. We can only connect to a rigid body. Is that true? Create. Okay. Yeah, I think that works. So now those are all connected. This is here, and now I can go into my rigid body and say forces follow position and rotation. So now it doesn't want to move. So now I've got a whole bunch of hairs which are connected to that thing, and that thing does not want to move. So now, with any luck, give it a save, simulate turbulence, give it some scale, give it some strength. Let's hit play and see what we get. Okay, gravity's on, so that makes sense. Control D, simulate, simulate scene, gravity 0. Okay, now you see kind of what I was going for. Now they're all drifting about. I will now go in and let's set the properties up for this. I'm going to say that it's allowed to be quite bendy. I don't care about stretchiness, but I do care about radius. I'm going to give it a radius of 5, which might be too much. In fact, why don't we feed this immediately to a sweep so we can get an idea of what the radius should be? Inside, increase it to 7, decrease this way down. And essentially, I want to push this until these look like they're starting to like intersect. Maybe a little intersection is fine, but yeah, something right around there. And now we look at what the radius is, which is 7. And now inside of the hair, we'll give it a radius of 7. I believe that should work. And in the sweep, again, let's turn off caps just because those take a surprisingly long time to calculate. Hitting play. Now we get all these little noodly guys. These are real hairs that are actually existing in the scene. And because the rope simulation is actually quite fast and very accurate, all of these should be able to drift around and intertangle with each other and kind of drift and do their own thing. And they're all actually really there. So now let's do maybe a quick attractor. Very similar to what we were doing. Let's make a attractor. I'll set this to be constant. Maybe let's just test out how that looks. Let's see. The turbulence seems pretty good, but I will make it stronger. Let's go with the 55, which might be quite a bit. But let's hit play. Just get lots of motion there. I'm kind of trying to get a vibe for the overall scale, which seems pretty good. And now we've also got this attractor, which in general is going to tell them all to be pulling near the center. So you got all this turbulence kind of whipping everything around randomly. And you can see that the curves don't want to bend too much. So I might say that this is allowed to be even bendier. And as soon as I make it bendier, you see they started kind of collapsing in themselves. So now you can see that we're ending up with a somewhat similar setup where they are all like piling in and we're ending up with this cool noodly look. But nothing's intersecting. It's actual simulation, and all these are avoiding each other by the very nature of they already all existed. So, they're actually doing a nice job of drifting around. And then the last important ingredient here, the last important ingredient here is we want them to grow. So this is sort of a fake, but I have found that this actually works pretty well. And let's see if this works. The sweep, is the sweep gonna, that's end scale and growth. Yeah, this is the thing that's a pain. So I every day that goes by, I dislike the sweep more and more. I think it desperately needs an update. And one of the things it doesn't have is per segment. You see there's no per segment checkbox here. So that means I can't do this end growth from the end and just pull them in because it's only ever doing all of them. Now, having said that, I think we got other options. Let's try using the trim, the Rocket Lasso made trim. There's definitely some things I'd like to add on to that, but this does have a per segment. And if I were to grab the end, okay, I thought that this might not be happy with the simulation, and it seems like I might be right. But maybe we get around that with a connect object. Maybe not. So let's feed the hair into a connect, and then we'll trim the end result of it. That's the idea. Let's let that run a little bit again. So that's running just fine. And now let's grab our trim, and that works. Okay, yeah. Now the reason for that is when the trim was directly a child of the hair, the simulation was like the point count is changing, and it was freaking out. But now the simulation is doing whatever the heck it wants. And then after the fact, thanks to this connect, we're saying, well, okay, whatever the result of what you did, we'll trim off of that. So having said that, yeah, now I can grab this, and maybe we'll have them be there a little bit in the beginning. Let's keyframe end. I don't know how many frames we want to go, but let's go like 2,000 frames, and then there they will be fully grown. I will select them and say linear, so there's not like a really long drift time in there. Probably just made that way too long. And I could imagine making two turbulences. You know me, I like making a large turbulence, and then we'll make a tiny turbulence just to get two different flavors of twisting going on there. So let's give that a save. And now if we hit play, and actually I might want to do, that wouldn't modify the radius. But now you can see that we've got these little things, and they're just kind of doing their own thing. But you can see that they're not intersecting, and it just feels like they're growing properly. But in theory, there's actually a really long spline that's like intertwisting and tangling and doing all that stuff. But we don't really feel those. Like they are here, they might be having an effect, like maybe one bops against another one. But really, it's hard to tell that. But you see that these are going to continuously look like they're growing. But keep in mind that what's really happening, if I click this, you can see that they're, well, I guess let's just turn off the trim. Like this is what's really happening, but we're only showing certain parts of it. So they look like they're constantly growing, and they'll kind of like grow and interweave to where these twists have made them go. So yeah, pretty fun combination to be able to do that. Noodle. Yeah, those are interweaving pretty well. Let's grab the attractor, make that stronger. So I just want these all like tighten up a little bit more. And the turbulences are great, but honestly, I might make all this stuff stronger. Let's say 111, more turbulence. Attractor 55, make that stronger. Yeah, I'm just trying to get like more motion. So you see how crazy like tangled up as all these grow. Very kind of CNN-y. But yeah, they all are like properly tangled up, and the reason it's going to work perfectly is that it is actually running the full simulation all the time. We're just looking at certain parts of it. So again, we can turn off the trim at any point and see that they're actually a little bit longer than that, kind of like whipping all over the place. But as these are slowly growing in, they'll just like grow and intertwist on top of each other. And oh yeah, flying spaghetti monster. Let's just create a couple of spheres here. There you go, proper flying spaghetti monster. Yeah, look at him. But yeah, I'm not gonna make those collision objects. And then here, I didn't want to have too many subdivisions on here, but again, as a post effect, we could use those. I'll save this one here, and if we want to, I'll save another version and say RKT utility splines. You can see here that I want the simulation to run at relatively low fidelity, so it doesn't take too long. It still runs really well, but now I can take that and throw that into a utility spline. So I'll put that into a smooth, and now we'll say get rid of all smooth. So this is exactly what it should look like. And then I'll say subdivide at least once, and then you see there's extra subdivisions in there. And now that there's an extra subdivision, I say give it an iteration of smoothing, and suddenly it rounded the entire thing out. We've doubled the resolution without increasing the calculation time of the simulation at all. This is all a post effect. So now if I zoom out, you suddenly see that it looks a lot smoother, and that shouldn't affect our simulation time at all. So it's the best of both worlds. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm gonna grab that keyframe that I said was probably way too far out there. The trim. Let's grab that keyframe. Ooh, it's being wily. There we go. And let's drop that down to like 1,000. Let's make it go a lot quicker. I want to see the growth happen. Oop, what did I do? What? I'm gonna hit undo. Grab that. Key time 1,000. Okay, it just jumped there. That's weird. The why? Oh. See, the utility spline seems to be bypassing. It's returning the entire spline instead of the end result. I might need to put that into another connect. And also, let's say, don't remove. Does that work? Okay, cool. That worked. Yeah, it was seeing the entire spline as unmodified. That's a limitation of some of the capsule stuff, but for the most part, you can always just put into a connect and it'll solve the problem. So now we're seeing these grow a lot quicker, and they're already all nicely tangled up with each other. So that's how you get live noodles. Anything else I do in here? We got friction. We could say zero friction, so they can slide past each other a lot more easily. Bendiness, we could say that they're really bendy, and now they're going to be able to like really get knotted on top of each other. The radius, we want to keep that radius, but keep in mind you can always increase your radius. So I could say tick this up to even 10, and now it's going to force a little bit of space between them. So it's still colliding with each other. We're just sweeping at a smaller radius. So now they'll never quite touch each other. They'll always be, I'm trying to find a specific spot where they're like very near, but like at no point will they be able to directly, like maybe right there, you see that they can't quite intersect, or they'll never touch because we made the radius a little bit larger than what they originally were. But we can go back to 7 and let them get, cluster as tightly as we could, possibly want them to. In theory, we could also take that inside sphere. We could animate that or move it around and get all sorts of additional motion. A lot of potential art directing you do here. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty crazy animation. I do love the rope simulation that we have in cinema now. Cool. Any follow-up questions to that? Could we drop it in a bowl? Yeah, maybe. We have a lot of forces here that are kind of would be fighting each other. Let's see. Here's a couple quick modeling techniques I've been using a lot lately, where I can turn this into a hemisphere, and then we can make a transform geometry nodal capsule, and you do all sorts of things here. So instead of me rotating that axis, I could actually grab this and just say, wait, I need to spin around 180 because we're deforming it. And then I can say I want to scale it down on a particular axis. And this overall thing, I'll say, should be a significantly larger radius. And then why don't we make a select. I'm going to make a select here. Drop that in. And now this is like a parametric select. I'm going to say select all. And so everything's selected. And then I will shrink my selection. So parametric shrinking of a selection. And then we can invert my selection. Keep doing it over it. Invert selection. So now essentially what I've just done is grab this outer border, and then we can make a parametric delete. Drop that in, drop in the proper spot. And now you can see I was able to delete out that outer one. And as I shrink my radius, I can shrink it more and more. And you can see I'm able to delete out that outer edge. So essentially I've done that to make more of a bowl shape. Maybe this transform geometry doesn't need to be quite as squished. And then we can put this entire thing into a thicken if we were so inclined. Thicken that up, and there we go. Entirely parametric bowl from the sphere, kind of getting a nice looking shape. Okay, so now we right click on that. We make a simulation collider. Now the tricky bit here is going to be right now I'm telling this thing that it doesn't want to move. So I'm going to say, okay, well, you are allowed to move. So now it's going to start getting whipped around. We could exclude all these forces from it. So the sphere is only going to be yanked around by the rope. And I think the ropes are disproportionately heavy. So let's keep that in mind. And right now there's nothing to make it actually fall down. And actually another thing we should keep in mind is that in reality, these lines are already all passing through that bowl. So we'd probably want to keyframe that bowl into position for the simulation. So I'm thinking that we eventually end up here, or do we just move it down farther? Because I think we're going to end up turning on gravity. These lines are quite long, though. So I will move this way down. Ooh, and then I should make a center. Oh, no, it's an axis. If we make a geometry axis and we drop that inside the sphere at the end, then that's going to be centered right here on my axis. In fact, If I put it as a child of thicken, we can say pivot the bowl directly from the bottom here. And now you see that my bowl actually pivots from the correct spot. All layered up, all super nice. So let's move this way down. And then at the time of 0, keyframe. And then, I don't know, it doesn't need to be too many frames. We'll have this have moved like way up. That's it. So it's just so it's not intersecting at the very beginning. Okay, so there is no gravity. So let's noodles on grav bowl. Okay, so now if we play, everything should work. Now I expect this is going to start. No, I thought that was going to start drifting all over the place as the forces yanked it. We're not following the position. Actually, right now, they are growing and we can keep it growing, but let's just turn off that for now. So we're just kind of seeing all this stuff is already really happening. So let's just let it really happen. So those are all doing their thing. They're getting attracted to the center. I guess they are. This is the average of all of them. But I still feel like I'd see that moving a little bit, right? I feel like I'd see it moving a little bit. But there's no follow position. But maybe it's mass. Maybe they changed it, or maybe the mass is stronger than I remember it being. Because, yeah, we got the mass. If we were to visually hide the noodles, that does not look like it's budging at all. To the point of like, is it even moving? 0.1? I don't see any moving. 0.001? Oh, okay, now it is moving. Okay, I think it was just really heavy compared to what the strings were saying was the weight. So now it is free to kind of drift around and do its thing. And yeah, I do want it to be able to yank it around. I just, that proved a concept. Anyway, that looks really cool. Actually, having this bowl here does suddenly make it look like this magical spaghetti, like just floating above the plate. That's some nice poltergeist looking stuff. So now we might want to keyframe it. So maybe I'll just make a simulate forces gravity, and now we can apply it when we want to. But now there is gravity in the scene, and all of these are suddenly like, okay, like there's some gravity wanting to yank me down. So you see at any given moment, we could activate that, and the entire thing is like, okay, I want to fall. Looks like the sphere is falling slightly slower than the noodles, but it will eventually collapse. Keep in mind, its mass is still quite high, seemingly, relative to the noodles, so it's going to like really push those noodles around. But all these other forces are still going, so there's still all this turbulence, making stuff drift around and get yanked around. It's got 0 friction, so it's probably going to be very freely sliding around the bowl. But yeah, I mean, that's dropping it into a bowl, still like writhing around like a crazy creature. So looks pretty cool. Quick, somebody mint that as an NFT. Save. Okay, yeah. I mean, we've gotten lots of cool exploration. We went a lot of different directions with some of this. Just checking out. Dean asked earlier, instead of using the trim spline and the connect technique we did, if we could have had it grow by animating the hair length. And maybe that would work. But the problem, there's two things. The reason it might not work is as it gets longer, are we getting more segments? Because if the segment count changes, the simulation will freak out. You always need the same point counts going into it. So that wouldn't work if the point count was changing. And even if it was working, you'd have this really compressed detail down there, down in a very small spot. And then as you told it to get longer, if the segments were even, which we have to have them be, as you stretch it further and further and further out, you're actually getting less and less resolution on the line, which maybe would work, but I'm not sure how well the rope simulation would work if a bunch of these are like, if think of like a bunch of beads on a necklace. If those start getting pushed, if the beads start intersecting each other, if a bunch of like spheres along the spline start intersecting on top of each other, can it handle that? And if it can't, then again, that would be a limitation that would stop that from working. And then, I mean, the impressive thing to me, the thing that's pretty cool here is that in spite of like all these noodles exist. Well, now we're showing it where all these noodles exist all the time. But if we turn this off, that like all the stuff exists there. But generally speaking, I think it does a pretty good job of like hiding the fact that there is a bunch of other noodles. Now they're dropping the bowl. Maybe it won't quite be the case where this might be floating a little bit above the surface. Actually, that did a pretty good job. So like in spite of the fact that there's like this giant pile of noodles everywhere, and we're only seeing like a small part of it, it doesn't feel very. It doesn't feel wrong to me. Like a kind of like writhing around there. Um, yeah, that doesn't. It doesn't feel wrong. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's. I mean, there's definitely like a good illusion. Oh, it escaped. See it. There's an illusion of life going on there. Like it does feel very alive, which is pretty cool. Um, let's see. Let's uh, let's make it like a purpley fluffy ball. It's making me think of those like old squishy toys. Noodles, purple noodles. Looks delicious. Purple living noodles. Um, let's see. Um, Mutolib asking. I mean, oh wait, I mean the hair object. Let's see. Did you ask something earlier? The way you're wording it makes me think that there's a follow up, but I don't think it is. Or maybe. Oh wait, can I make? You did ask earlier. How can I make a hair object follow a spline in animation? Hmm. There might be ways. I actually don't specifically know. And then followed up saying, I mean the hair object, like long hair flowing, following a spline around a hair care product. Okay, I see. Um, that's not trivial. Um, a lot of that goes to what you actually want the end result to do and how controllable you want that to be. Let me think. If we were using literal hair, I don't know if there's some sort of spline guide that you can use, but in the way, let me show you. There's actually some cool details here that we might actually be able to use a little bit so we can continue this project. I'm going to treat it as a new question though. So we're saying 3A, still using all the other stuff, but let's just call this hair control. So if you didn't know, there's kind of a cool, do they have it here? Groom? Is groom the setting? Yeah. Okay. So groom is for hair. It's weird. It's interesting they call it groom and not hair. If you grab this brush tool, I'm gonna make it actually quite large, and I might weaken it a little bit. And kind of from the side view here, you can start. Let me grab the hair. You can start brushing. So I'm gonna kind of make some troll hair here. So we're gonna brush these around. Now, something you want to make sure you're doing constantly with this type of thing is constantly rotating your camera around. So you're always making sure that you're not getting anything bunched up in the way that you're not intending to. Let's make that a little bit stronger. Yeah, I just had a bad stroke there, but it's not the end of the world. So anyway, you can see that I'm just straight up sculpting this hair to be whatever shape I want it to be. So at a certain point, I mean, I was trying to get them to kind of drift around the way I wanted them to. This is getting a little messy there, but yeah, because I could just go straight up like that and everything's going to get overridden. Although that's not necessarily a bad thing. Let me show you what I mean. If we sort of just kind of put them all straight up, I'm eyeballing it, so this is like kind of like a little bit random. But there is other tools. I think there's a tool called straighten, curl, cut, straighten. So yeah, here's a straighten tool. Okay, so the straighten tool is going to apply along seemingly along the entire shape. So if I were to drag this, you see the whole thing's just going to drift back to its original position. But if I weaken it in one spot, you can see now the top is going. So instead, let's say I want to straighten the base of it. And actually, let's really control that. Right click, set this to be smooth type. And now I'm going to pull way back on that. So now all the power is at the very beginning. So now if I click and apply, now you can see I'm getting this very kind of uniform thing where these are now correctly out of the orientation of the shape, and I get them all pivoting upward. Anyway, this is just like some straight up sculpting technique. So this is a really, pretty good way of getting some troll hair going. I think there are other settings like clumping. So if I did that, yeah, now you can see that I can pull those all in. So there's actually a really good collection of like hair tools here that we do all this stuff. I can grab this straighten, just go to root, and I can, now, oh, it's still mapped. Let's reset that. I can just apply this a little bit here just to get them some separation. Anyway, you can see I was able to sculpt the hair like very, pretty precisely, all things considered. So anyway, if you have hair and you see I set this up to be splines, I can now just deform it the way I would deform anything else, I think. So like, let's make a line. Yeah, let's do a rail. Let's do a spline wrap. So here's a line. I'll face it on Y. And yeah, I'm going to make it long enough that you see it's kind of encapsulating the entire thing. It's kind of at the bottom going to the top. I think that's fine. Okay, now, a lot of things we don't need. We don't need gravity, attractor. We don't need the bowl. Don't need the turbulence. And honestly, right as of right now, I'm not even sure if we need any of the simulation stuff. And I am going to simplify a bunch of things. Maybe we end up bringing some of those back. Actually, I do think maybe we can just disable it. So now the simulation is not running. Okay, just in case. So now I'm just treating this like a modeling technique here. So I could sculpt all the hair exactly however I want to. And now we will make, we've got our hair object. Inside of our deformers, we can make a spline wrap, which is always difficult. I don't know what it is about this menu, but I can never find the thing I'm looking for. There we go, spline wrap. So we drop that inside. We're going to say, based on the Y plus orientation, I want to map onto this line spline. And you see everything just shifted a little bit. But now I've got this line. And in theory, if this is set up correctly, if I were to make a bend deformer and put this just on the line, not on the hair, if I move this up and I say bend, you can see, okay. Oh, I need some subdivisions on the line. That would help. Okay, there we go. So now you can see that as I bend just this line, that all of our hair is going to bend to adapt to it. So instead of worrying about running at a simulation, I feel like there's a good chance that we could just run this. We just run it here like this, like as a series of deformations. There's a 180 flip that happens there, but we don't have a rail spline, so that makes sense. So yeah, we could spline wrap this to like pass all through like a shape of a bottle. So a example here would be, let's make not a wave spline. Let's make a helix spline. And let's say this is going to be the shape that this is kind of wrapping around the bottle, generally speaking. And I'd kind of love to continue that line forward. But right now, I'm not going to worry about that. Let's just say the spline wrap is now worried about the helix spline. And you can see it's doing a lovely job of wrapping around there, which is also kind of a cool shape. And then the spline wrap has all sorts of settings like this offset. So you can see I can do this. Whee! Everything pulls back. That's actually flying back in space. The angle I had was being generous. But yeah, I can have this kind of come in from out of camera and spin its way around, doing just a great job. I mean, it looks great. I mean, I'd be quite pleased with that. Now, in addition to that, well, other things to keep in mind. Before that spline wrap happens, we've got this original hair. We could do things like make a twist. Twist, 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 twist. Even twist is hard to find. There it is. We have this twist. So that should be applied. I'm just going to say unlimited. So now you see the entire thing is twisting around. So that's another variable that you could keyframe that. You see the whole thing is now twisted before it starts going into the spline wrap. So you get some lovely twirls on there. Or I could spin it the other direction. Spin it as many times as we need to. So yeah, all twisted if you were so inclined to get a little bit of curve in there. And yeah, I mean, shockingly, straightforward to do this type of thing. Now, the thing I'd be curious about, and I mean, we might need to run. Yeah, I think I'd probably run the animation in reverse if I was doing this. But I am curious. I don't know if this will work. I'm curious if we could run simulation on it. So essentially, the idea would be that we start in the final position. Let's just say it should look like this, and we're going to um, go back to standard. We're going to keyframe this to go backwards, so it kind of goes away. Now, keep in mind, our final animation will play in reverse, is what the goal will be. So let's say at the time of 0 that it's fully in the final position. I'm going to go to my animation set to linear just for, you know, obviously putting in your curves later is a good idea, but right now let's not worry about curves. So keyframe the offset. I don't think we need too many frames, so I'll give it a little bit extra though. Let's say like 400. So at the end, this will go pretty much all the way back. Now, keep in mind, this is a helix. I'm just leaving it default parametric, but you could also say that, well, this hair should like continue off screen so we could put more spirals, or we can make this editable and draw the spline kind of getting this lovely curve that drifts off the screen, like wherever the hair is supposed to come from in the context of the commercial. I'm just not worried about that element of it right now. So yeah, now, if I scrub through here, this is all parametric. So this is just a spline object. So I'm able to say, okay, go ahead and do your thing. And it's drifting up. So now it starts out already up. So now can we add the simulation back in again? So re-enable, and let's do this potentially. I'm going to do this potentially wrong, knowing it's wrong, so we can kind of learn if this is necessary. I don't want to solve a problem that's not actually happening. So simulation's back on again. Let's turn off gravity. Gravity's still off, and we deleted gravity, so they're doing their own thing. As soon as I hit play, you have to imagine that these are just here. So simulation will take over. Right now, some of these might be colliding, etc. So if I were to hit play, let's just see what happens. I'll save this in the next version just because we're adding in simulation. If we hit play, I'm going to give it a second, but it doesn't like something. But that's why we save. It did not like something I did, which is interesting because there's nothing crazy here. All right, well, we literally just saved, so let me get that task mastered. Come on. And it doesn't want to die. There. And now let me reopen that one. Okay, it's reopening. It did not gaslight me this time. The thing where you have to click the icon multiple times once you've closed it. It's opening. Come on, Cinema. You can do it. You can do it. There we go. Burp. All right. Reopen A. I saved B, so B was lost. Back to B, or it was lost from the recent because it crashed before. That could be acknowledged. All right. So, okay, that's maybe a variable. Create. So now those are reconnected down there. That could be a major variable. We don't need the sweep. The connections seem fine. Okay. Dare we try it again? Everything else is still based on the same stuff. Go. Oh no! I thought that would work. Well, it just opened, so let's give it a second to initialize. Oh, okay, cool. It did wake up. Okay, so all those collisions are quite harsh. So you see, they just because all of those were bundled up in one spot, they flung each other apart. So there is actually kind of a solution to that. I don't know how well this will work, but let's do a very simple kind of keyframey thing. Let's turn off the hair. I'll go forward a few frames, not many. Let's even just go like 10 frames. And let's grab our radius and keyframe that. And I'm going to say at 0, the radius will be, it's probably not allowed to be 0, but yeah, it'll be 0.0001. So essentially the hairs are super skinny. And it's going to take a few frames for them to come into having their baseline thickness, which means they shouldn't explode out from each other so much. So let's just see. Yeah, well, you see they did move apart from each other, but they didn't explode. Now, oh, that's interesting. Oh, several things are interesting. What's going on here? Why did that rotate? Oh, is that going to be one of those things? um yeah, this is sort of combining some of that old school. The hair is like modified, but now the base object that's getting modified got drifted to a different location, and now it's floating in some bad weird spot, and it's resetting every time. So it looks like hair is not super happy being. Actually, hair's not doing much here. I kind of feel like that shouldn't be happening because hair's this. I thought in my head I was doing like hair simulation, but we're not doing any hair simulation. That's all turned off. But the object, the actual hair, is not. Although, okay, if I turn it on and off, it does go back to where it needed to be. So, as long as there is a way to reset. So those are drifting apart. That's just fine. But I think they might be intersecting at that starting location, and that's why it's getting yanked away. Like we just got this monster that's like, oh, I'm intersecting this thing, so I'm going to fly far away. We can probably just get around that by re-locking this in and possibly going back to the mast and saying that's really heavy. So now that can't move, so the hairs can't yank it around. So let's turn on and off hair, and now try that again. I think they should drift apart from each other, but this shouldn't go flying away anymore. Yeah, you see these hairs are kind of intersecting and getting a little bit crazy. So yeah, there's potentially some limits to that, but here's we can continue the experiment because we're back. We're looking good again. So now I'm going to make it gravity, and the sphere will exclude the gravity. So gravity is only happening to the hair, and we're going to do negative gravity, so it's going to blow upward. So if we have play, let's see what we get. So now they're going to drift apart, but now you see everything wants to drift upward, which is cool. That's kind of what I want. It's these intersections are kind of looks like one of the monsters from like Princess Mononoke or something. I think that these just might be straight up intersecting each other based on where I put them. And so they're, kind of flipping out because of that. Let's do a couple things. Right now I said the hair is very bendy. I'm going to say you're not as bendy. Potentially we could put some of the friction back in again. That'll also help calm them down. There's quite a few subdivisions. Maybe they don't need quite so many, but if I change that, I'm going to lose my sculpting. So I'm not going to mess with those types of settings. And you do see how these are like super kind of like bending and pinching into each other. So, all that stuff is variables and why that might be kind of twitching around. Hair, dynamics, generate, alignment, advanced. I'm just curious. We're like right now, you can see it's kind of doing that adaptive subdivision, but I don't think I don't think that setting's exposed. I think it's just always that. Yeah, pretty sure. Yeah. Um. Okay. So anyway, we got the gravity, and the gravity is up there doing its thing. The hair gets all super crazy and pushes apart. So yeah, I really don't want that to happen. But it might just be inherent in the process here. I am curious. I'm going to grab my two keyframes. We're going to scoot them forward a couple. And I'm going to say it's going to take longer for that to grow into position. I just want to see if for the first couple frames, those are not too worried about. Okay, they're not. So yeah, slowing down the radius actually will stop those from exploding. Now we could put like an attractor in there and tell all the hairs that they want to be near the center. I am feeling inclined to throw a friction in here. just have everything calm down a little bit so everything's a little bit more drifty. Yeah, that calms everything down. Um, we're still getting like these are still like intersecting, which is causing like these kind of harsh movements, which is traveling up as kind of a cool looking ripple, but like that base thing down there, probably want to avoid somehow. But I think it's just based on the hair radius, which maybe we could fake that by going easy on the radius. Oh, yeah, and the radius is keyframed, so we click on that keyframe and say, hey, smaller. Now that might not be small enough, and maybe it's a different issue. But that seems better. Hard to tell. But anyway, thinner now, they're going up. So anyway, here's my thought is now we've got all this cool simulation happening, but it is happening on simulation level, and we are able to deform after the fact on that type of thing. So if we put the hair, I think it's safest to put into a connect, and then we'll move our two deformers after the fact. Although we might be able, I don't know if this would happen. If I put the twist inside of the hair, is that what gets simulated? Will this untangle? Yes, it will. Okay, that's kind of cool. So it's kind of like where, yeah, we can say it deforms after fact or before the fact. So by putting as a child the hair, that's what's getting acted upon by simulation. And now we have a connect object, and now we say, well, this is what acts upon it after the simulation. So you see it's getting applied there. Now, the one thing that we're going to have to do is we've got this bounding box setting, which maybe you haven't ever used, but essentially this bounding box is constantly updating to whatever it thinks is the shape of the object, and it's going to always automatically update. But if we say it's a fixed bounding box, we can actually rescale this and just make sure it's the correct scale of our object. And I think it's even allowed to escape the box, but that just means that essentially as we're running the simulation, and let's turn that off, as we run the simulation, you're going to see that it's all going to stretch upward. It's going to get a little bit longer, which would modify the bounding box, which would kind of mess with us a whole bunch. But if we say, don't worry about that, don't worry about the bounding box, then that should be fine. So now we can turn this on, and keep in mind that's still running in reverse. So let's hide those deformers. So I'm just curious, this is what I don't know. So let's hit save, is are we now going to get the illusion of a bunch of really nice simulation going, and then it gets wrapped around our helix? So let's find out. Okay. Good sign so far. And now the keyframe's yanking it back. So yeah. So keep in mind the simulation is happening before this deformation. So it's not seeing the end result here, but it is successfully stretching this down. Now, it is getting stretched extra long, and that has to do with my bounding box. I probably want to make that bounding box a little bit longer in the beginning. You see how it actually stretches at the start there? But that's not bad. So yeah, it's kind of like the best of both worlds. Now we have a hair simulation that we are art directing to go exactly where we want it to. That's actually not, I said hair. We're using hair, but we're running rope on it. So in no way does this actually have to be hair. We could have done this in a dozen different ways. And probably some significantly better ways, honestly, given the current setup. But yeah, I mean, that essentially covers what I wanted to. The just for completion, I'll save that, and let's render this out as a viewport renderer, which I'll say copy the effects from the viewport, load my presets, output, and let's just run that. And then let's see if we run it reverse. I wouldn't be surprised if it's going to look a little bit clunky. Oh, that's unfortunate. Oh, wait, that's also set animation. I wonder why the spline wrap, I told it not to be visible, but it is. All frames. So with any luck, this will kind of whip through that. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some clunky frames in the beginning when it's kind of doing that settling thing, but by modifying that initial bounding box, I think there's a lot of things we could do to make that work. And I didn't spend any time really art directing. I made the wind and told the wind to keep blowing upward so the stuff didn't drift too far. But we could be doing all sorts of additional attractors and wind or turbulence to make all the hair want to like drift around in different waves. Actually, I might go and do that just for this. I love adding in some turbulence here. So we let that run. And then this is how it looks forward. So, because yeah, that little herky jerky start is kind of a problem. But now we see we've got a pseudo simulation that is art directable. Then we go to the end, and now we run our animation reverse. So we've got all these, in theory, these wild hairs that are drifting around doing all their own crazy stuff, super duper art directable. And now, like you said, we're probably going to, but now, it eventually solidifies into it. So with a correct application of different forces and frictions and, having those, art directing all the different components that we fed in, I think we actually get something like really, really good. We got that hair. Oh yeah, we've got our gravity, which is great, but I'm going to go easy on this negative gravity, and we'll make a turbulence, and we'll make it a relatively large turbulence, not too strong, and we'll make another turbulence. This one will be relatively tiny. Those might be way too strong, but not even worrying about our deformation. Now we've got all this turbulence. So you can immediately see this larger turbulence is getting, like, already, look how nice and organic that looks. Generally speaking, everything's still going to be blowing up into the air thanks to the gravity saying it should go up. So now we have these turbulences that are putting extra forces in there. Let's try increasing the strength just so we can, now you can like really blatantly see these like drifting around doing their thing. And let's, just to show you, if I were to make just my small turbulence go, you can see here's like the tiny one doing tiny effects and maybe being individual on those. In fact, I might make the scale. Oh, actually, no, this is the big one. I was going to say the scale, I'm seeing the scale. So we'll make the big one bigger. So let's just see if we can feel that uniformity. Yeah, you see right there in the beginning, you can really clearly see like what direction the drifts are happening. And that's kind of what I want from a big one. I want to see uniformity in movement. But then separately, we make this tiny one and I activate that one. Let's restart. And now you see how this one feels very individual. It didn't feel like there was uniformity. It felt like everything is separately doing their thing. So we can turn that on, and yeah, now we get this big, like, look at these big organic drifts going, and you get these little individual ones. So like that combination is really cool. So now with that kind of slightly more art directed version of it, maybe we could even increase the friction a little. But with that art, more, we spent more time making that look nice. So now let's run it in the simulation here. I still expect that same problem where it's going to kind of drift in the beginning, but now we had just so much more like flowing happening, and immediately you feel that turbulence kind of drifting that stuff along. I probably want to subdivide these or maybe use the utility splines to like smooth these out because they're a little chunky. But look at how organic that feels. And as long as I had everything generally going upward, this spline wrap is still allowing us to place the things where we want to. Getting pulled back around, everything drifting. Even here, it's kind of good where it's like as the animation goes on, they're getting more chaotic. But that just means that when this finishes, we can run it in reverse, and it starts out chaotic. All these hairs doing their own thing. And as it goes further and further up the chain, it is getting more controlled. So you could essentially pre-art direct it. It's all a little slow right now, but you could pre-art direct it before you worry about wrapping it to get like all the cool motion, and then you just deform it after the fact. There would be other methodologies to do here, but this is the type of rig that I would build where I want to make something very controllable. I want to make something that I'm not like fighting a whole bunch of particle simulations, doing all this crazy stuff. It's like, no. I am simplifying my simulation as much as I can, where we get this shape just drifting upward, doing its thing. I can see exactly how it behaves, and then deform it as just a piece of geometry after the fact. We could definitely clean up that bottom thing that is still bothering me, but I think you get the idea. So yeah. And then just, to talk about the faceting here, like we've got all these deformations happening and whatnot. So you see there's actually not that many subdivisions, but this is still in the setup that I can feed this into the Rocket Lasso utility spline. So I can put that into a smooth, and again, that probably needs to be in another connect inception here. So I put that into a smooth, and we will say subdivide. And actually, I'll probably even subdivide twice. And now I got a whole bunch of extra points there. And I can just do an iteration. And now look how super silky smooth that made that. So again, we can run that super low res simulation. And now utility splines are helping us make that look super duper smooth after the fact. So yeah, that looks great. Wow, that made a huge difference. Yep. But unless there's any additional follow-up questions on this one, I'll move on to some other question. Let's see. Yep. Noodle horror movie from earlier. Excellent. Motolib. Seems like it was what you were looking for. Can we do procedural bald spots using fields? Um, I I'm not sure if that's a serious question. Um, but I actually don't know the answer. Hair is very it's integrated, but it's an older system inside of cinema. So let's make a hemisphere here, and no, a hemisphere. Um, if we were to generate hair, it's funny that we got all these like hair questions going on. Don't use hair too often. So we got all this hair, and we are just cloning onto, let's say, the polygon vertex. You do polygon center, and then the best of all would be the polygon area. So now they're just being randomly created, and they might be appearing anywhere. And now we can just make as many of these as we want, fill the whole thing up. So that's what's being grown, and these are the guides. So it's very important to distinguish between guides and hairs. Now, here is a relevant setting, which is called density. So density is supposed to say there will be more or less hairs. There'll be more or less hairs based on a texture, and that's almost the only way of doing it. We could limit the initial thing we made to a selection, but then the hairs will just pop into existence. That honestly, the same thing might happen here. Actually, yeah, I think it would. The same thing would happen here. But I am curious, just as a kind of curiosity. Let's go to our, where does that hide? Hairs, viewport, generate as render. That's not what I was looking for. I want hairs. I want to see them though. There's a setting for, am I completely blind? Guide, forces, cache, parting, culling, advanced, dynamics, generate, viewport. Oh, okay. No, this is a setting. So under viewport, change this to be the actual hairs. And now how many hairs are we getting? Right now it's 50,000 hairs. I'm going to say 5,000. Let's make this reasonable. So there are now 5,000 hairs. And that's interesting. Oh, yeah, we'll make there be 5,000 hairs. And then in the viewport, this slider saying how many are we seeing. So if we crank up our detail all the way, then now we're seeing them. Is there a way of not, I don't want to visually see in the viewport, generate as render. I don't want to see I guess that's what, well, I have it selected. There's the hairs as we see it. So here's what I'll do. I'll lock that so I can deselect it. So now we actually see the final hairs. So now under hairs, under growth, we have density. Now, if we were to move inside here and go to noise, how do I have all this information in my head? This is crazy. If we were to move into this noise, here's a 3D noise, and I can say, well, it's a 3D noise, but I don't think it's interpreted 3D. I think it's interpreted 2D. So if I crank this global scale up to like 200, it's like, well, it felt like something happened. And as I change these, it doesn't actually look like it's updating. Is it different or not? I'm not sure. So anyway, first of all, I'm going to go under contrast. I'm going to crank the contrast up all the way. Is it not going to do that? Let's change that to 2D. Nope, that didn't do anything either. That's weird. When we first put that in, when we first put this in, I thought I saw it do something. Okay, well, now if I say, I'm going to change it to levels 2. So now it's essentially only seeing black and white, and that's why I cranked up the contrast. But let's let's remove dynamics. And I'm just going to hit play to be, in theory, triggering any kind of refresh. And if I go inside here and I change the global scale, yeah, that's, I don't understand what's going on there. If we change the scale of the noise, how is the noise not changing? But this goes back to what I was saying. Hair is an older system. It can be a little bit janky, like the way you apply certain things is not necessarily what you expect. If I turn this on and off and it regenerates, maybe it would be different. It doesn't seem like it was. Go back to texture, that didn't change anything. And it doesn't seem like changing any of these is going to change anything. So honestly, it's like I don't even know what hair is doing. This is just confusing to me. Like, what is it referencing if changing all those numbers doesn't do anything different? Because it did something. Like it did something here that does look like a noise cranked up full contrast. Yeah, it's okay. Even that's interesting. Maybe there's a setting somewhere, but you see, I just changed the level and suddenly it refreshed. Um, so it seems like it is simply not refreshing. So maybe there's a refresh property or something, but it's not. It's not refreshing. Um, but that could be. That could just be this preview that we're showing ourselves. Like maybe if we went back to guidelines, like maybe these guides, those also have growth, and that has a density, and now we could feed a noise into that one instead. Copy the shader, clear the shader, guides, paste. So now we saw that, but is this one going to update? Like, no, that one's not updating. So there seems to be some sort of refresh issue that's happening on that. Anyway, I was trying to, I was trying to see if we could actually use noise to do it, and while technically it is seeming to do it, that doesn't seem to drive it. Now, I think the question might have been, um, um, who asked the bald spot question? Bald spots using fields. Anyway, yeah, that's where I was going to go next. Was you asked about fields, and I went right in the shaders. But the reason I did was the idea was going to be, could we feed in a vertex? The only way I could possibly imagine doing this would be feeding in a vertex map shader. Now we've got a vertex map shader. We create a vertex map on the surface of the object, presumably vertex map. And in that vertex map, we can do something like a noise, and the noise is kind of global, so we can crank that up, and I will make a quantize, drop down, so now it's just black and white. So essentially now we got a vertex map. So can we make that shader view this, and does it respect it? No. So I mean, there you go. That was a what I thought had a possibility of working. Not surprising. Hair is quite old. Hair is an old system now. It still does quite a few things. I mean, it was a really good advanced system for its time, but quite old now. Um, mm, 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 mm. Yeah, regrow simulation might be a thing, but unfortunately, it doesn't get us to if the fields would work on here, which they just straight up don't. Um, yeah, and the axis, I don't think there's a particular axis for each hair. I was gonna say maybe we could turn this into a spline, put it into a fracture object, fracture all the segments out from each other, and then um, use like fields to scale everything up and down. But I don't think they pivot from the correct spot. And honestly, at that point, given some of the systems we have in cinema now, like doing this through hair might just be a silly way to go, because we could do all this with cloners. Um, Although cloners would still be, I guess cloners would be doing a similar thing to hair. But if I make a cloner, set that to object, the object is the sphere. It's cloning them onto the surface, and then we make a line, drop that into the cloner, and um, make more of them. Tell the line to aim on Y, actually no, on Z, and now those are essentially now it's like the guide. Now it's exactly like the guide ones, but now we're just in cloner land, and cloners run incredibly fast. So I could say make 1,000 of these, so we got 1,000 hairs, and then we just obviously we can just drive everything via selections, or even probably more specifically, we make a plane effector, And we can do, I'm not sure how visibility would work here, but we can, feed in that random field. And now not only are we getting them showing their visibility, but they're also getting colorized. We can turn off the color if we want to. And I am quite confident now that if we hit play, and we set an animation speed, that will animate. So, we didn't need hair to generate almost exactly the same end result. And the rope simulation at this point, I think, is significantly more robust than the old hair simulation would be. So now these popping in out of existence, maybe running simulation on that wouldn't be such a good idea. But I don't think the hairs would work with them popping in and out of existence and running their own hair simulation either. Okay, we're almost out of time. Let's see if there's any other questions. Let's see. No links. Yep, there's some people helping each other in the chat, which is always great. Hair settings and the hair material may help. Yeah, agreed. That there's also the hair material, but a lot of that ends up turning into like the scale, and the scale ends up having the same problems where the textures map onto things oddly. Tobias, I know you had a request and it got seconded. There's just not enough time to tackle another one, but we sort of had a smooth flow through all the questions today, doing particles and noodles to hair. So yeah, save that question for next week. I'd love to tackle it. I'll be keeping an eye out for it. But yeah, even right now, I'm just keyframing or animating the visibility, but we could say don't do the visibility, turn that off. Instead, we'll just turn on scaling, uniform, absolute, -1. And now they'll scale in and out. And even if we wanted to essentially do the same thing we were before, just have a little bit of subtlety to it, then we could, I can think of a couple ways, but the simplest thing might just be a simple curve. So you just make a curve and like really crank up those two conditions. Go really far. Like that. So there's not much transition time. In fact, yeah, I can even grab these and scoot them in. So there's technically, actually, that's an interesting thing that I mentioned that before. The spline handles get weird if they get stretched too far. But anyway, do that, and I can pull them 0.4, 0.6. So yeah, now they're scaling, but you see there's at least a little bit of a transition. And essentially, this is what I'm always trying to get out of hair to do. And here we're actually just able to animate it. But then there's always a challenge because we do have all these little speckly lines still existing there, but at least they're scaled all the way down. But that looks pretty cool. I imagine a bunch of renders could look pretty cool from that. Tobias posted the Slack channel, which is always worth mentioning. So you can head on over to the rocketlasso.com/community page and join the Rocket Lasso Slack channel. Every week I post at the entire channel to tell everybody when the live stream is happening. So it's a great way to get a reminder. And you can chat with other artists and just kind of, post work you're doing, get feedback, ask other people what's going on. So it's kind of a fun thing that you can do. Come and join that community. And if you're looking for it, all the scene files from this episode and every scene file from not only season 7, but 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 are all available on Patreon for anybody supporting at the engineer tier. So I guess I'll save this one just because why not? So yeah, if you want to support Rocket Lasso, that is a great way of doing it by getting access to all these scene files. Not hair scaling.c4d. Yeah, and I've been getting everything posted super. I think every single episode, this will be episode 12, I get it posted the same day. I'm just forcing myself to do it because otherwise it's really easy to fall behind on those. Anyway, I do believe that is going to wrap this one up. I want to thank everybody for coming and hanging out, as always, asking questions. There were really good questions today. If we didn't have questions coming in, we couldn't do the live stream. If we started consistently not getting enough questions, I would stop doing the live stream. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out, as always. And I guess I'll just say until next week. Bye-bye, everybody.